All right, I think we're ready to begin. Welcome in Felcha to Random Thoughts from County Antrim, and I'm your host, David McDonnell, and this is my half hour of random thoughts, historical information, yarns, stories, and whatever else tickles me fancy. And today is Independence Day, the 4th of July, 2021. So I thought I'd talk to you a little bit about Independence Day, not only in America, but in Ireland and around the world. Now, actually, make sure I'm going here. Yes, I'm recording. Actually, one could easily argue that Independence Day was last Friday, July 2nd, because it was on July 2nd, 1776, that the Continental Congress met in Philadelphia, and they passed a resolution declaring the United States independent from Great Britain. And on the same day, there is an example of this in terms of contemporary view of that resolution. On the same day, the Philadelphia Evening Post published, and I'm going to quote, says, "This day the Continental Congress declared the United Colonies free and independent states." It was the 2nd of July. Now, Thomas Jefferson actually started writing the Declaration of Independence as early, I think, as June 11 is the day he started. And when he got his draft finished, he gave a copy to John Adams, and he gave a copy to Benjamin Franklin. Each of them did some editing and made some comments. And Jefferson took those comments and put in some of their concerns, so he addressed Adams and Franklin's editing, but not all of it, and he added a few more of his own revisions and prepared a final draft. So while the Continental Congress approved the resolution for independence on the 2nd day of July, it did not approve the final draft of the Declaration of Independence until the 4th of July. But was the Declaration of Independence signed on the 4th of July? No. There was a famous painting by John Trumbull, and it was done in, I think, something like 1818. And it's in the painting is now in the Grand Rotunda of the United States Capitol, and it depicts the delegates of the Continental Congress meeting in Philadelphia and taking turns signing the Declaration of Independence. And I think you've all seen that painting. If not in Washington, you've seen depictions of it elsewhere. Very, very famous painting of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. The problem is it's all fiction. See, the delegates never gathered in one place at one time to take turns signing the Declaration of Independence. It really wasn't signed much at all until August 2nd, 1776, and that's when a clean copy was produced by the Secretary of the Congress. And John Hancock was the first to sign. Many other delegates signed on August 2nd. Others signed when they happened to be in Philadelphia sometime thereafter. The last guy to sign was a delegate from Delaware. Not that Delaware is all that far from Philadelphia, but he did not sign the Declaration of Independence until 1777. Now, the first place to celebrate the signing of the Declaration of Independence, or the Declaration of Independence, not necessarily the document, but the colonies declaring themselves independent of Great Britain. The first place to celebrate that was Philadelphia, as you might imagine, since that was done there. And they celebrated independence on July 8, 1776, 6 days after the resolution, 4 days after the final draft of the Declaration of Independence. George Washington was in the Army, with the Continental Army at the time, and he didn't even hear about it until July 9th. And the British government did not hear about America's claim of independence until August 30th. So I guess there's a variety of dates which one could use for the celebration or claim of independence by the United States. So I guess the 4th of July is as good as any other. Now, fortunately, those morons who stormed the Capitol on January 6th, they vandalized a lot of things, but fortunately they did not vandalize the artwork, some of the historical artwork in the Capitol building. So the Trumbull painting, the well-known Trumbull painting of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, is still in good shape. So I thought I'd mention some other Independence Days around the world. Surprisingly, it is not a universal celebration, so I thought I'd just give you just a sampling. And here are some. I'm going to start with some where independence is a day of celebration. It is a holiday. And one of those is our neighbor to the north. Actually, it's also east of me, where Michigan is shaped. When I lived in Detroit, Canada was actually south of me. Windsor, Ontario is south of Detroit, which not a lot of people understand or realize the geography of Michigan and Ontario. But in Canada, July 1st is Canada Day, and when I was a boy, it was called Dominion Day. And it celebrates July 1st, 1867, when the several colonies in what was then British North America were combined into one, Canada, and it became a dominion. And one of the great celebrations that I enjoyed as a kid and taken my kids to was the fireworks display on the Detroit River. It was always between July 4th and July 1st, jointly celebrating Canada Day and American Independence Day. And the fireworks were set off on the Detroit River, and you could watch the fireworks on the Canadian side, or you could watch it from the Detroit side. But a wonderful, wonderful celebration of independence of both the United States and Canada. Now, as an aside, where does the name Canada come from? Well, there is an old joke. I remember hearing this years ago, but it was the first explorer to Canada enjoyed what he saw, but figured he needed to name the place and didn't know what to name it. So he took some letters, wrote letters on sheets of paper and threw them in his hat. And he said, I'm going to name it based on what letters I pull out of my hat. And he stuck his finger in the hat, pulled out a letter and says, it's a C, eh? And he put his hand in, picked out another letter. Next letter is an N, eh? Put his hand in the hat, pulled out a third letter. It's a D, eh? And that became the name of the country, Canada. But that's an old joke. Actually, the name comes from a native word, Kanata, usually spelled Kanata, and it means settlement or village. And when Cartier first explored or came down the St. Lawrence River, he had with him some guides from Huron and Iroquois guides. And he created a settlement on the north shore of the St. Lawrence River, where Quebec City now is. And the Huron and Iroquois referred to that village, that settlement, as Canada. And the French speakers, somehow it came out Canada, and they spelled it Canada. Now, the first French map maker, drawing a map of that region and that settlement, he drew a map showing the St. Lawrence River, and on the north shore of the river, he drew a little settlement which he named Canada. And within a few years, subsequent map makers did a similar thing, although they weren't as precise in terms of locating the settlement. So they drew the St. Lawrence River, and all the land above it, they put in larger letters, Canada. So it didn't take long before the region, the vast region north of the St. Lawrence River, became known as Canada. And the name stuck. All right, so who else celebrates Independence Day? Well, Mexico does, September 16th. That's the date in 1810 when they declared themselves independent from Spain. Brazil, likewise, September 7th. That's the date in 1822 when they declared themselves independent from Portugal. And I didn't do an exhaustive search, but I did a quick look, and it looks like almost every country in Central America and South America do the same thing. They celebrate the day they either declared independence or won independence from Spain as a national day of independence. Took a look at some others. Poland, for example. Poland, it's a long history, thousands of year history of the Polish people. But it was carved up. It was wiped off the map in the 1700s. The Prussians, the Russians, and the Austrian-Hungarian Empire just chopped it up, and each took a chunk of Poland. And Poland did not exist as a nation for well over 100 years. But they celebrate November 11th is their Independence Day. And that day, coincidentally, is Armistice Day, the day World War I ended. Because as the Russians settled World War I before then, as the Germans were moving their troops that were in the east to the west to continue the war before it ended on November 11th. So before that date, Polish nationals were beginning to set themselves up as an independent nation. And on Armistice Day, they officially declared, we are independent. And they've been independent ever since. Who else is on my list here? Africa is another one that was... if you look at the countries of Africa, with few exceptions, they were colonized by European colonial powers. And nearly all of them have an Independence Day. It's the day that colonial rule ended. Similarly, with India, they celebrate August 15th from that day in 1947 when British rule of India ended. Israel's an interesting one. Israel celebrates theirs on May 14, or thereabouts. Because it was on May 14 in 1948 that Israel declared itself an independent nation. Now that date was on the 5th day of Lyra. That's on the Hebrew calendar. And that date on the Hebrew calendar can fall almost any day in April or May on our Western calendar. And in order to avoid any kind of desecration of the Sabbath, it is usually often celebrated a few days before or a few days after the 5th of Lyra. So that, and it's celebrated from sunset to sunset, so that, for example, this year, it was celebrated on April 14th and 15th. And then next year, it'll be celebrated May 4th and 5th. So on our calendars, it's a variable date, but it celebrates the Declaration of Independence of Israel. Now, I'm going to give you some countries that don't celebrate Independence Day, and it may or may not be surprising to you. But for example, Australia. Australia Day is January 26th. And that date in 1788 was the day the British fleet arrived in Sydney Cove, and claimed Australia for Great Britain. Now, obviously, there were people there already. And there are people in Australia, the indigenous population, which don't refer to it as Australia Day. They refer to it as Invasion Day. Another country is Germany. Germany is another. Germanic people have been around for a long, long time. Thousands of year history. But the first Germany Day was celebrated in 1990. August 3rd is Germany Day. October 3rd is Germany Day. And that's the day that West Germany and East Germany were united. So it's not the independence of Germany or the founding of Germany or the origination of Germany, but rather it's the uniting of East and West in 1990. Russia's another one. Russian Day. It was first celebrated in 1992. Although Russia's been around for centuries, a millennium or more. And it's June 12. And it was June 12 in 1992 that the Russian Federation was created, right after the collapse of the old Soviet Union. France is another one. The closest equivalent to an Independence Day for France is Bastille Day, July 14th. And July 14, 1789, is the day the French stormed the Bastille, the infamous prison, in the French Revolution. And that's celebrated as the day of the Revolution Day in France, equivalent of their Independence Day. Spain is an interesting one. Spain celebrates Hispanic Day on October 12th. Now, why October 12th? Well, that's the day Christopher Columbus first set foot in America, in the Western Hemisphere. And they celebrate Hispanic Day, Columbus Day, it celebrates spreading the Spanish legacy around the world. So Columbus Day is called Hispanic Day and celebrated on October 12th. We celebrate Columbus Day as well, although there's been a movement, a good one, I think, because Columbus brought Europeans to North America. He also, to the indigenous people that were here already, they could probably call it Invasion Day as well. So there's been a movement to change Columbus Day to Indigenous People Day, and that may or may not happen here in the United States. So what about the United Kingdom? Great Britain, Wales, Scotland, England, Northern Ireland. They don't have an Independence Day at all. There is talk about setting up some sort of national day to celebrate Britishness, whatever that might be, or whatever people might think it is, but they don't have a day like that yet. The closest thing they have to that, and the closest thing they have to our 4th of July, is the Queen's birthday. So obviously that date changes depending on who happens to be the monarch of the United Kingdom. Italy has the closest thing they have. It's not an Independence Day, but they celebrate on June 2nd. It's called the Festival of the Republic, and that celebrates the formation of the Republic of Italy on June 2nd, 1945. That was just after the defeat of the Italians in World War II, the killing of Mussolini, and the overthrow of the fascists. The Italians set up a republic, and that's what they still celebrate today. South Africa's another one. South Africa won its independence from the British as a separate Dominion nation decades earlier. But what they celebrate on April 27th is their national day, and it celebrates the first election in South Africa after the end of apartheid. So they first celebrated that in 1994, and every year since, celebrating the end of apartheid, the first national election without apartheid. So that gives you a little clue. I went around the world, and I think I got most of the continents. I don't know what they do in Antarctica, but I may not do anything at all. But I got most of the continents in, just to let you know what day people celebrate, like we do on the 4th of July. So that brings us to Ireland. I thought I'd wrap this up by telling you a little bit about Ireland. Ireland does not celebrate any day which could be called Independence Day. The closest day it has is called the National Day of Celebration, and it's on July 11. Actually, it's not July 11. It's on the closest Sunday to July 11. And it's a day to commemorate and to remember all Irish people who died in past wars. And these include United Nations peacekeeping missions. But it's on the closest Sunday to July 11. Now, why July 11? Well, that was the date. July 11 in 1921 was the day when the British offered a truce and a negotiated settlement in order to end the Irish War of Independence. Now, the Irish accepted that offer. There was a truce. There was negotiations for the settlement, which continued well into the fall of 1921. And it ended up with a treaty that was approved by both the Irish and the English. But it was a treaty that was not what many people in Ireland wanted. Because you have to understand, the War of Independence in Ireland was to establish Ireland as an independent republic, totally independent from Great Britain. And what the treaty did is it made Ireland a self-governing free state in a dominion within the British Empire. And its dominion, status was similar to that at the time of Canada and Australia, New Zealand and South Africa. It was a dominion of the British Empire. Now, under the treaty, the head of state of Ireland was the monarch of the United Kingdom. So it remained King George, or today it would have been Queen Elizabeth. And to be an official of the Irish government, the Free State government, you had to take an oath of allegiance to the British monarch. And perhaps as galling as all of the rest is that 6 counties in the north of Ireland were not part of the treaty. They were going to remain part of the United Kingdom. Now, the vast majority of the Irish accepted that as a good first step towards independence, but many did not. And there was a bloody civil war that followed in Ireland, and it lasted almost a year until the Free Staters prevailed. Now, Ireland's complete severance of political ties with the United Kingdom took much longer. Immediately Ireland abolished titles of nobility. Statues to those kinds of folks were ripped down. In fact, most of them, there were few standing by 1921. The Irish Republican Army blew up almost every statue of lords and ladies and queens and kings. The British, as a dominion, the British Parliament technically had the ability to overrule legislation adopted by the Dominion nations, again, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, South Africa, and then Ireland. But this was largely illusory. They didn't do it much, if at all. And British Parliament kind of did away with that power, took away its own power in 1931. Ireland amended its constitution a few years later to delete the requirement of the oath of allegiance, so you could serve in the Irish government without giving an oath of allegiance to the British monarch. And Ireland completely rewrote its constitution in 1937 and declared itself a republic. So many of the aims of the War of Independence were really not fully achieved until 1937. Although as a practical matter, the Irish were independent, free of their own destiny since 1921. Or at least the southern 26 colonies. The northern 6 counties. The northern 6 counties remain part of the United Kingdom. So perhaps in the eyes of many, it's premature to call any date as Independence Day in Ireland until all of Ireland is independent and united. And perhaps when and if the North and South unite as a single republic, then Ireland will celebrate that day as Independence Day. Much like Germany, a celebration where Germany Day is a celebration of the union of East and West. Maybe someday there'll be a Independence Day in Ireland with the unity of North and South. So So that's my podcast today on the 4th of July, 2021. Send me an email at clandonald@gmail.com if you have any questions or comments. Take a look at my website, clandonald.net. Like and share my Facebook page, and like and share this YouTube video if you do in fact like it, which I hope you do. So until next week, goodbye.